Andy, I believe that you've got the first question in your hand.
I do. It's up my Insta sleeve. It's from Johnny K6. How important is it for England to be different under Lee Carsley compared to Gareth Southgate?
Oh, good one.
Playing style, I think it is important. Emotionally, I think it should be the same.
I think, I think it depends what you mean by that. I think if you could talk about, results, then I think, don't really want results too different to what we've seen.
I think
just one more.
Yeah,
we just want one more different result.
We can assume that Johnny doesn't mean less friendly to the press.
No, right.
No, I think Johnny's talking about playing style.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Oh, is he, Andy?
All right,
definitely
you know him, do you? You know him.
To be fair, I put it in the intro line.
Yeah,
you
did actually. Yeah,
but I do think this is quite important. Now, of course, if Carl's ball turns out to be more like,
you're never going to get Carl's ball off the ground.
I'm not doing it. It's even the Guardian are saying it.
Are they?
Yeah,
even the Guardian,
even them. If that reverts to old Gazball, then if England win a tournament, I think everyone will be okay with that. But that's the World Cup is 2 years away, and there's an awful lot of matches in between now and the final, and England might not be involved in all of them, Andy. So let's not start that. But I think
don't start it.
And he always does. But I think it's and they'll play Turkey in the final. But I think it is important that England have a different approach under Carsley. Carsley's reputation.
Get off the roof of that Carsley, it's going to collapse.
That is an old reference which nobody other than you and I will get.
That's the beauty of it, though. Go back and listen. Go back and find it.
Please don't. So I think with Carsley, with the reputation he has and what's been said about him, people are expecting something a little bit different. I think they're not expecting anything huge because Carsley is not a huge name in football, but I think people are thinking, okay, fine. But I think it is important because the playing style under Southgate was criticised for a while by some people, but definitely in the last Euros, it was very conservative, we have to say, and it obviously worked to a very distinct point. So I think Carsley needs to be his own man, and it's just not more of the same, because I think people will maybe a bit of any feel-good factor, which is still there with England, which I think it is. I think it might start to wane a little bit, as we've seen with, say, Scotland, for example.
And the feel-good factor will remain as long as the players that we've got, which everyone acknowledges are really good, deliver results that are commensurate with the ability. And that's really the most important thing that underpins all of this. But it's also about how Carsley's been billed.
Yeah.
So he's been billed as someone who likes to play football with the success he's had at age group level in a more attractive, dynamic way than Southgate did. And you're right to point this out. You've got to keep banging this drum because no one else remembers it. In World Cup 2022, England did play football that scored goals. Right? People have just forgotten about it because of what happened in the build-up to the Euros and then the Euros in 2024. But Carsley has been billed as someone who plays more attractive, more dynamic football. And when you take into account the two things that he's kind of going to be known for at this point, one of them is that. The other one is he's coming through to manage England at the moment on interim basis, but he's managing England nonetheless, going exactly the same pathway as Southgate's gone. And a lot of people who support England and who watch England go, that's familiar to me, because I wasn't for that before, but it worked to an extent, and then we got sick of it. So ultimately, what Lee Carsley's really being billed as is more of what happened before, the successful parts of what happened before, but added dynamic, interesting, attacking football as well. Now, that's all great, and obviously everyone's where do I sign? Do you know what I mean? Everyone's up for that. Yeah. But actually, the stakes become high because it depends how long people will be patient with him if that doesn't manifest itself. Because, of course, regardless of what's happened at age group level, this is a far bigger, far different challenge for a number of different reasons. So the answer to the question from Johnny K6 is it is important because the biggest cross that Gareth Southgate had to bear towards the end of his career was the style of football that he had his team playing, which people were not convinced by.
In tournaments particularly. Apart from Qatar.
But also the build-up to the Euros, it wasn't great.
No.
So the friendly warm-up games, it wasn't great either.
I suppose this is the issue. What can you ever prove in Nations League and World Cup qualifiers? There's a limit.
If you're England, it's very difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult to do that. But I think in terms of how important is it for England, I guess you could slightly flip the question and say, how important is it for Lee Carsley? It's very important for Lee Carsley to be different because he is not the huge name that a lot of people unrealistically expect and may not be suitable for the England job. For him to get public support and possibly even for him to get appointed full-time, it needs to be discernibly different for him to say, I am the man to lead this forward and to get some sort of public support. Now, he is clearly quite conscious of that, because if you look at the squad he's picked and a few of the, I guess you could say, more surprising names like Angel Gomez, Morgan Gibbs-White, he is prepared to die on his own hill here.
Which is what I said on Thursday. It was the easiest. What I said on Thursday was it was the easiest thing in the world to be the continuity candidate and pick the players that have been picked before and say, I can get a better tune out of them.
Yes.
He didn't have to gamble, but he's chosen to gamble.
Yes.
And I think that's significant. I do. And I think that probably speaks to the underlying emotion behind the question from our friend here, Johnny Kay, because he's clearly thinking, well, like the rest of us, the end to an extent justifies the means, which is always the defence of a boring coach. Jose Mourinho in 2010, right? The end justifies the means, right? You get past Guardiola's Barcelona, you win the treble. All he does is throw three fingers up and say, I delivered to Inter something that's never been delivered before. So forget the football, right? But it falls down instantly if you don't deliver.
Look, if Lee Carsley can do what Mourinho did back then and summon an Icelandic ash cloud with his satanic powers, I think England have got a great chance of winning the World Cup.
Either way, I think we all hope it ends with Marco Materazzi in tears.
No, I'm up for all of that. Particularly
Makes a World Cup.
I do get to
the age-old debate. We've been doing this show for 17 years, right? The age-old debate that's always been there and will never go away is the idea between different types of football that people like or don't like to see. And it's different for different fans because you look to different things when you're watching football. We're all different individuals. But ultimately, the justification for playing like shit is winning. That's it.
With the flair players England have, people expect a bit more. Rightly or wrongly, we talked about Southgate there, but you have to understand that point, whether you agree with it or not, or whether you agree, as you've talked about, Andy. It is an understandable point.
The wider football fan culture has decided that is what we deserve.
Yeah,
rightly or wrongly.
I mean, Lee Carsley as well. He was the first ever coach. The FA created a role for him, which was the out of possession coach. Okay, this guy is very studious. He's done his homework. It's now time.
It's a lovely egg.
It's a beautiful egg, a Brummy egg. It's now time for him to
chopped up in a cup.
Yeah. Well, it's now time for him to an opportunity for him to do this and show people what he's capable of. So
definitely,
we should.
He spent his whole career in that setup. Getting ready to wear the big boy pants. Well, the big boy pants are on now. Is he going to soil them or not? We'll find out later on today, to an extent.
Let's hope not.
What colour is his pants, is what I'm saying.
Luke, please.
Hopefully they're not brown.
The next question.
Friend of the Ramble, Claire. Hello to you, Claire. We love to hear from friends of the Ramble. Well, all of our listeners are friends of the Ramble, really, but these are proper official friends of the Ramble. Yep. And Claire is one of them. She says, I was listening to On the Constant yesterday and can't believe what's happened to Victor Osimhen. With so many stories of players getting basically stranded at different clubs because of long contracts or unsustainable wages, where do you see things changing? What's going to give? I listened to On the Constant and heard Nicky talking about how Osimhen didn't actually have a bad season last season. No. People are overstating it and all the rest of it, which is fascinating to me. But I guess the wider question is about the idea that players are costing so much money now on such big contracts that it's quite difficult to find what our European football expert friends like Andy would call landing spots for them. Victor Osimhen seems to have been one. I would say Ivan Toney was another. Yeah. Perhaps for slightly different reasons. But it's probably best you go to that question first, Andy, because it's quite a fascinating area, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think what Claire says about long contracts and unsustainable wages...
Chelsea, listening Chelsea fans?
Well, this is something really that it's been there for a while. Because I think if you look at two players who've marked the Premier League a lot in recent years, it's definitely affected their fate in the way they've gone. And I'm talking about Harry Kane and Wilfried Zaha.
Right.
Players who wanted better control of their careers and didn't get it because they signed big contracts that they couldn't get out of. So that stops Kane going to Manchester City a couple of years ago. You could argue that's a very good thing for the Premier League.
Would you blame Charlie for that?
But
Charlie Kane?
Would I blame him for that?
Yeah.
I probably didn't even have the pen on him, did he? I mean, but
yes, you can do the photo, Charlie, but that's it.
I think you look at Zaha, who was in this weird netherworld. Again, these are all individual cases where he's way more valuable to Palace than he is to anyone else at his prime. So not only has he got a contract, a very well-paid contract, because remember, it's easily forgotten, he took a pay cut to go to Galatasaray and play Champions League. he was sort of stuck there. So there's stuck and stuck. I mean, the wording of the question is quite interesting. What's happened to Victor Osimhen? He was sort of complicit in this because, just to briefly recap for those who aren't aware or haven't listened to On the Continent, he signed a new contract going back into January, which was
at Napoli.
Yeah, which was not meant for him to stay at Napoli, but to facilitate his exit. Aurelio De Laurentiis had been asking, the owner of Napoli had been asking for about 200 million for him.
They needed to finance Scott McTominay, of course.
They did.
Yeah, obviously.
The situation in Napoli, they all knew he was going.
Yes, the contract was signed to facilitate his exit. So it gave him a release clause of 130 million euros, which seems very reasonable at the time. And it also gives him a huge pay bump, which is a thank you for winning the title for us.
Yeah. Was it sort of similar, not too dissimilar to, say, Ivan Toney in part, in that the club knew they wanted to cash in on him and he was kind of like, I think I'm ready to go elsewhere.
Yeah, the big difference is Napoli start having a massive panic when these wages that they think they're only going to have to pay for 6 months, there's the possibility of them having to pay that for 12 or 18 months, and they simply can't afford it. Yeah. And that's why they get themselves in a bit of a tiz. And of course, the fact that the market has changed is not Osimhen's fault. It's not really Napoli's fault. The fact that no one's going out there, and if you go back a year and you say 130 million for Victor Osimhen, there are a load of Premier League clubs who are interested. PSG are interested, and it's a deal that gets done in double quick time for that sort of thing. So I think in terms of things needing to change about long contracts and unsustainable wages, I mean, something already has changed. Of course, there's a limit on how long a contract can be. You cannot sign a player to an 8-year contract anymore. That's not allowed by UEFA and FIFA rules. So what Chelsea were doing has changed. Of course, that is different because if we're talking about unsustainable wages, we're not talking about Chelsea because those wages are spread over the length of a contract, heavily incentivized. So they're not absolutely killing themselves in the short term financially. So I think the Osimhen question is a really particular one, but what it really tells us, more than Napoli have played it quite poorly, maybe Osimhen could have done it a bit better as well, but I wouldn't really cast him as a figure of blame in this. I think what this really underlines is not really a problem with the current system, but how quickly the transfer market has changed and how quickly the biggest clubs in Europe and even the biggest clubs in the Premier League have tightened their belts in the last 6 months.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and do you think as well?
So these players get stranded then, basically?
Well, they get stranded because there's nowadays, and it's been the case for a few years, there's only a few landing spots, really. Yeah. Chelsea were obviously very interested this summer. Arsenal were a while ago, but, so unless you've got one of the top Premier League clubs or PSG, Real Madrid, but you've got to be... There's not that many, is there?
No, there aren't. But on the Ivan Toney thing, though, what's interesting about that, and the key difference, is clearly that Ivan Toney's wages were very, very low for a player of his ability.
Yes, it's way different for that reason.
I was confused. So I understood. I remember when the transfer window closed, Marcus and I and whoever else was on the show went through the potential places that he could have gone, and we ruled out all these Premier League places.
And you're absolutely right.
But why didn't anyone in continental Europe want him? Why was the only other option Saudi Arabia? Given I understand if he was on a massive Premier League contract, you're really kind of limiting your options, but he wasn't.
But I think because of what he's asking for, because he's 28,
fine, so he priced himself out of it.
Even though his contract and Osimhen's contract are very different, I think the urgency for Toney to get a big contract and make up the money that he didn't make earlier in his career, when you think of Northampton, when you think of Peterborough, when you think of even Brentford to a certain extent, I think there's definitely a sense with him of, I need to cash in now. And I think that's entirely reasonable. So he prices himself out like Osimhen does, but for a very different reason.
Also as well, who actually is going to pay 40 million for him? Other than the top clubs in Europe. The top clubs are not going to go in for Ivan Toney.
Given that his contract was so short.
That's the point I was making earlier. It's like, who's got 40 million quid to go for a guy who, I hadn't scored a goal, since he'd come back from Brentford, maybe scored one. Obviously there was the ban he had, blah, 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 blah. I think Tony's a really good player, don't get me wrong, but it was always going to be a Premier League club or end up staying, or then you had
But didn't Atletico pay like over 30 million for Alexander Sorloth or something?
Yeah, but Sorloth has scored a ton of goals in La Liga. I mean, there's no guarantee that. I mean, there's never a guarantee, obviously, but there's no guarantee that Ivan Toney can do that.
And Toney has played a specific type of football in his career, and even at Brentford as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's in this weird.
It's very Scandinavian English. Sort of thing, yeah.
Agreed. And he's in this weird sort of purgatory, isn't he? Whereas he clearly thinks that he can play at elite level. Mm-hmm. There's a suggestion that he might be able to, but no guarantee that he can. There's his age, and he's everyone's second choice. If you think, even with Al Ahly, he's their second choice. They wanted Victor Osimhen first. He's the backup. And that makes it incredibly difficult to make an optimum decision, I think, when you're everyone's backup and you're waiting for other people to move first.
So, Claire, the answer to your question is that Victor Osimhen and Ivan Toney are quite specific cases. Things have changed slightly already because there's been a limit on the length of contracts that can now be given. And you're also saying that the transfer market's changed massively in the last year anyway, and it's probably going to continue to do so.
You know what? I think you could perform a really useful role in my household, because if my wife asks me a question, there's a 6-minute answer.
Yeah.
If you could press it into like a voice note into 20 seconds, that'd be great.
Mr. Brassel, he says yes.
It's weird to me, Marcus, because he told me before that under no circumstances did he want me to contact his family. So he's changed his tune on that.
Well, and I don't blame him for that. But I think also, Claire, when you say what happened to Victor Osimhen, I think Andy working for the Turkiya tourist board, this is the fruits of it now. He often bangs on about Istanbul being a great city, which it is, Andy. I've been there, but unless I'm asked, I don't really talk about it.
No, exactly.
And I think
the serious answer, of course, so Marcus, sorry to cut in, is that actually Victor Osimhen did quite a lot of his best work behind a big face mask, and no one knew it was him.
No, that's right.
They couldn't guarantee they were going to get the right player they wanted.
There we are.
Yeah, it's in disguise.
All makes sense in the end. Coming up after the break, could amateur football scrap the offside rule? And Steve McLaren gets us thinking about our dream managerial career.
All in umbrellas on the touchline at Wembley.
See you in a moment. Welcome back to the Football Ramble Mailbag, everybody. Andy, you've got another question. You've come loaded today, haven't you?
I have. It's in the other sleeve. It's from James. Fascinated and a little depressed by the news that the KNVB, that's the Dutch FA, are thinking about binning the offside law in the amateur game to combat violent disputes with referees. What do you guys think of this?
Yeah, there's been some alarming news in Netherlands with regards to that
grassroots
football information. You know, the amount of violent conduct has increased quite a lot in the last few years. There was obviously that horrific story back in 2012, I think it was, when a referee's assistant who was helping officiate a game which his son was involved in got beaten to death. Ultimately,
quite literally.
I know that sounds horrific. That's what happened. He was punched and kicked. It was awful, absolutely awful. So that obviously, that's the kind of thing that will stay, in the mindset of people with regards to this sort of issue when trying to combat violent disputes with referees in that country. So I feel it's a great shame that you're having to change the laws of the game, or one specific law, which is a huge law in the game, because of violence, essentially. That's the first thing to just say. It's a painfully obvious point to make, but it's such a shame that this discussion has to happen.
Absolutely. They don't have to do this, though.
No.
I mean, they've chosen to potentially go down this route as a way to combat it. Look, the issue around amateur, I can't speak very well to the situation in the Netherlands. I just don't know, and I'm aware of that story you mentioned, but beyond that, I don't know the detail of it. But I know that, amateur officials being mistreated and abused is a real problem in the UK. When I was on the radio, we used to hear stories about that kind of stuff all the time. Felt like it was endemic, really. You wouldn't really go a month without hearing a story about a referee at grassroots level, or even age group level, sadly, being abused, usually by parents of players or Sunday league players who have aggression issues. And the answer to that is always, you need more funding, more education, more security. But the money in the game is very focused on certain areas, right? There's loads of money in the Premier League, clearly, but there isn't loads of money at grassroots level, even though the Premier League do send out some money. Yeah. It clearly isn't enough given the state of facilities around the country and the protection that doesn't exist for referees who, let's be honest, do this because they love doing it. For a very derisory amount of money usually, and they want to be involved in the game, and they are very, very important. of paramount importance actually for grassroots football, because without them, you can't really do anything. So that's the point I would just say, is that, really they need more funding, and there needs to be more education and more security for that stuff to happen. And there are people and organisations within football in this country that could solve this today if they wanted to put together task forces, get money out there, and start to secure grassroots football more effectively. In terms of the badge and the offside, clearly what's happening is that is the most contentious area for refereeing and assistant refereeing decisions that happens in football. I remember when I played Saturdays and Sundays, if you didn't have a proper assistant referee and it was the coach of the other team, it would be quite farcical at times, and it would be stupid.
But it's such a hard one to call for referees.
It is, and tensions run high and all the rest of it. So banishing offside, I kind of do see the logic in it. The problem is with that, and it's like, as Andy was saying to us earlier, it's quite mad how some of the ideas that these Dutch players have, Marco van Basten and the rest of them.
He wanted to spin offside in the pro game.
He did,
yeah.
and I was just going to finish my very, very long-winded point by saying, I'm all for making it safer for people at grassroots level, and I'm all for adjusting where you need to adjust because you can't replicate the top level of the pro game. But banishing offsides makes it a completely different sport, and we need to acknowledge that. And you have to wonder whether the cure is actually worse than the disease.
It's not really attacking the root of the problem.
No, it's treating the symptom, right?
That's the thing,
but not the cause.
And I see a reasonable amount of amateur football as well, and I would echo the issues that you were talking about there. I have to wonder if the problem, whether it be in the Netherlands or the UK or elsewhere, it's just about the discourse around referees. I think we can separate the professional game and the amateur game too much at times. The professional game constantly influences the amateur game.
Yeah.
There's from kids copying their heroes going all the way up.
Yep.
And I just think, and it's something that, whatever you think of VAR, that it's made worse. The discussion around referees is so unbelievably disrespectful, is so unbelievably clueless to the job that they actually do. And I just think other people in the media, have got a responsibility to understand what it is like to referee, to understand how difficult it is, to speak about them in more respectful, understanding terms.
I feel a bit seen here.
I think as a culture, we've started to move. I think we've started to move more closely to continental discussion on referees, which, by the way, is a very bad thing. I think post VAR, we have moved from some people saying the referee's an idiot or he's got it wrong, to saying it's a conspiracy and he's corrupt.
Yeah.
And that is incredibly damaging.
I feel a bit better now because I haven't done that.
No.
I haven't done
Not
that
on mic, anyway.
No, look, and I think the VAR thing's really important on that. People roll their eyes hearing the words VAR being spoken about on the show because it's boring, and I get that. But ultimately, the reason that it's become different since VAR came in is because the stakes are higher. Because football fans were told this will sort all this out, and it hasn't. But people feel like it hasn't.
That's the problem, actually. I went to a seminar recently in Germany, and it was a former referee who heads up the use of technology.
Oh, is this when you asked him a question when everyone wanted to go for lunch?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
But this guy who's the former referee who's in charge of technology and refereeing, it was really interesting because he said what we need to do is appreciate that VAR is here to help the referees and to improve refereeing.
Yeah, which it has.
And do you know what? I thought it was never sold to us like that. It was sold to us here in England, as Luke said, as if it's going to eliminate mistakes, which is never possible.
But this is the thing. I agree. And I think before I start going on that, I think perhaps we go back because I think it's a good point to make.
Yes.
And so going all the way back to this situation involving Dutch football, amateur football, and the KNVB, I just think that if you take away, so obviously the reason why they're toying with that one is just naturally the ebb and flow of the game is offsides are the ones that are the decisions that happen all the time, especially in the amateur game, and it's really hard to call for the referee. If you take that away, then people will complain more about fouls. You're not going to change it's
whack-a-mole, isn't it?
It is whack-a-mole. You're not going to change the hearts and minds of people who are wanting to be violent and be incredibly disruptive and illegal at times in this.
Can you find a reasonable solution for unreasonable behaviour?
So you take away the offside, like, all right, and then what is it next? And then what is it next? And I don't have the solution, by the way, but I just think that is changing the game, and that will change the game for the vast majority of players who love playing the game and are not dickheads, who are not nasty bastards.
I always thought that in terms of treating the actual cause of this rather than the symptom, I always thought to myself, whenever I heard all these stories and read all these stories about this happening at grassroots level in this country, I always thought it would be a fairly easy situation to solve, I think, because in Germany, whatever level you play at, you have to be registered with the local FA, and you have to have an ID card, and you have to present that, and it's all done.
Yeah, same in France.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you do. You're meant to have that here.
You don't. There's no way.
So now, so in the London football leagues, there's a photo of you on the websites and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But they never check.
Exactly. So that's what it comes back to what I was saying before about funding and security and education and stuff. If you had a proper body. The problem is, it's so. What I'm about to say seems so ridiculous because you really can't even find a decent pitch or decent changing facilities at grassroots level now, with the exception of 4G pitches, which we're just seeing more and more. I understand that, but the idea that there should be a body and it should be well staffed enough for every game. I'm not talking about pickup games, but every game at a certain level, amateur level. Game. They have to be registered. They have to be checked. The same way that you're checked if you go and do, you book something and you go and you get your name ticked off and all the rest of it. And that what that means is if someone does contravene or someone does behave unacceptably, it's far more easy to ban them. If you ban someone now for violent behaviour, if a player at a Sunday league level headbutts another player and they get a ban, they have to go up in front of the local FA, they get a ban, they get a big fine. Realistically, they can play the next week by giving another name.
Yeah, cool.
No one will stop them.
Yeah, so
that's a real issue around this.
It is, and I don't know what the KNVB have done, by the way. So that maybe they have done all these sorts of things, but there are. As I understand, referees feel completely isolated. It's them and 20 odd, maybe 30 odd other players and people watching the game, but. A Sunday league I used to play in, there was a hint of violence in a game that we played, and they were banned, chucked out the league, and it sends a message to the rest of the players, and the leagues and everybody, they can send messages to people, and I think that going down that alley and trying to find something there is much better than banning a law, a very important and huge part.
I mean, just to take it from the other angle, I would actually very much like to see a game without offsides. It'd be interesting.
Yeah.
It would.
It would. But see
what happens. It'd be good. But I'm not sure they should do the whole of the amateur football.
Please insert joke about Filippo Inzaghi coming out of retirement here.
Exactly. Coming like a WWE wrestler.
There we are.
Walking down the aisle.
Right, let's finish on something a bit lighter from Jess. Steve McLaren is playing his first matches with Jamaica. He's managing them.
He's playing.
Yes, Jess, we should be clear about that.
There's been some communication.
That'll
be the accent he's put on.
Or maybe he is playing some matches in amateur football in Jamaica. Who knows? But he's in Jamaica this week. He's managing the national side, and the first matches are coming up. What would your dream managerial career be? Feels like an international job in sunny climes is the perfect way to enter your twilight years.
Yeah, international football dream management would be for me.
Yeah. Cleaning up with England, the big three.
Yeah.
Euros, World Cup, Nations League.
That'd be great. Obviously, take that as read. Yeah. I'd love to go.
That would age you more than Tony Blair, though.
Depends how you do it.
If you're winning, Andy, you'd be all right.
Depends how you do it.
Yeah.
Winning's a hell of a drug, Andy. I'd quite fancy getting up to Scandinavia.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I've got no
Which
interest.
one?
Sweden, probably.
Would you?
Yeah.
That does not even slightly surprise me.
I would have picked Denmark myself.
I don't know if Luke ever said this to you. He once said to me, if I go in H&M in Stockholm, everything suits me.
Yeah, it does, because I'm tall and I've got blonde hair.
Yeah, and very sexy.
Thank you very well. Listen, I couldn't possibly comment on that. But what is nice for me is to know that one of the world's most respected football journalists remembers a throwaway comment I made 15 years ago. That's incredible for the ego. Incredible for the ego.
Andy, presumably...
I haven't finished yet.
Okay.
Bloody hell.
I thought that you'd be so popular in these
short
places.
career, isn't it?
No, but you'd be 15 years in that role.
10 minutes at Sweden.
He's not even got into the role next player yet. Come on. Give him a chance.
So England, Sweden.
For me, I have to think very carefully about sunburn. I can't be going to sunny climates all the time.
Right.
I can't be spending my time in Jamaica. It'd be terrible for me.
So you're taking the Roy Hodgson route,
big
basically.
time.
Yeah.
And I also, Mark isn't going to be very happy to hear this, but it's not his answer, it's mine.
No.
I've always been fascinated with visiting Mongolia. I'd love to go there.
Right.
And I think I could bring something to that job. I looked them up. They're absolutely terrible.
All right, Mark Watson.
They'd be happy to have me. They would.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. It's actually Paul Watson, not Mark Watson. So you've let yourself down there.
Well, Mark's interested.
It's his brother.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
He does something else.
Well, he reads his brother's books.
Yeah, okay.
And that's you read Paul's book, so there we are.
Sorry, mate. Sorry for picking you up on that.
Apology accepted. Apology accepted. Why would I hate you go to Mongolia? I'd be all for it.
You sign up, I'll never come back. You're happy with that?
Okay. It'd be strange, wouldn't it? You a World Cup and Euros winning manager.
Clean up with England.
Yeah, okay.
Pop up to Sweden.
What are you winning with Sweden, realistically?
Euros. And then off to Mongolia.
I think you could have been more realistic with Nations League with Sweden.
Off to Mongolia to win the World Cup.
True. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll get to the World Cup.
Yeah.
And see how you get on.
Yeah.
Quarter final.
Against England.
Yeah.
Beat England in the second round.
Well, how many rounds would it be by the time? Because all 210 nations will be at the World Cup soon.
That's what I'm banking on.
There you go.
Yeah.
Obviously for England, for me, I think to finish the international
You're going
career,
to Finland now, are you?
to end the international career, it's got to be. I'd love to win the Africa Cup of Nations, Andy. You know that I've said that many times.
That.
Who with?
Ghana.
Nice.
Come on, they haven't won it. It's been so long.
Can you not
long.
see yourself in the orange tracksuit of Cote d'Ivoire like Sven?
I could.
One of his best looks.
It was a good look, Andy, but I think that look belongs to him.
Yeah. Fair.
And
if we do eventually move into a new
English.
studio, by the way, I'm going to petition for us to call it the Sven-Göran Eriksson room.
Now you're talking.
Yeah. Get a little blue plaque stuck up there for the great man.
Oh, big time, yeah.
But
so
Ghana haven't won
with
it since,
Ghana.
82 or something like that?
It's been a long time. It's been a long time.
this
And look,
is-
I love them, they love me, it's perfect.
This is everything that you'd expect.
How do you manage to sound like the dictator of Ghana?
Speller going straight in for international management.
Well, come on, that's the vibe, isn't it?
That's the vibe.
And I'll choose yours, Andy, if I may. I'll predict what you're going to
France,
say.
Portugal, Turkey, Germany.
No, I don't-
AFC Wimbledon.
I don't think he would
No,
go.
none of those.
Oh, okay.
None of those.
Not Turkey, none of them. Portugal and Turkey, you're odds on for.
No way. First off, Monaco. Because
Nice.
I think
Because you hate paying tax.
Around the money.
well,
Around
that's-
the fellow moneyed ones.
I was going to say.
that's the main thing.
Okay.
But I think it's
Al Ahly.
I think it's the fact there that no one's going to come up to you in Carrefour and start saying, "Well, why didn't you play 3 at the back at the weekend?"
Yeah,
no one cares.
yeah, no one
So
cares,
you can
exactly.
conduct all those tactical experiments you like. I reckon once you get fired there after, say, 4 months, because they are quite trigger happy. I reckon in terms of international football, Iceland.
There you go.
It's got to be Iceland. I think it would be such an enriching experience, and also it would go into my aim to live until I'm 150.
I had a brilliant story about Iceland the other day. You'll love this. A friend of mine, Andrew, he works at another podcast company now, but he was working for, I think, The Sun Online in 2016.
Oh, dear.
And they said to him, get yourself over to Iceland for England-Iceland. We need someone on the ground there to see how Iceland get on.
In the Nations League?
No, in the Euros.
Oh, I thought you meant to. He was going to.
Were there any people left in Iceland?
Listen to this, right? So he was sent there and he was thinking, great, no one's going to care.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a quick little column because England are going to win. It's going to be fine. Obviously, Iceland win, right? He has to write this massive thing about how it was received in Reykjavik. He's he finds one other England fan there at the time, and he goes over to him and goes, I should introduce myself really because I'm doing a piece about Iceland against England. You're the only other English person I can find. And the guy was like, great to meet you, Steve, UK ambassador to Iceland. Just out there having a beer.
Yeah.
They drowned their sorrows together and then came.
It's a lovely old job.
Yeah.
It's a lovely old job. Okay.
Andy, you could deliver glory to Iceland. I can feel it. So you are famously as well very, very good with languages. Marcus, is that fair about Andy?
Oh, yeah.
Could you do Icelandic?
There's only one way to find out, right?
Get him over there.
Get over there, and no doubt that you'd be able to make a big old contribution to the penis museum that they have
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A medium-sized contribution to the Penis Museum.
You see, I was just going to have a little throwaway comment about sleeping on Damon Albarn's sofa, but you have to make it
Has he got a place in Reykjavik?
Yeah, he's an Icelandic
There's
citizen.
another penis there for the museum.
Thanks for watching a clip from the Football Ramble podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a video. And if you're feeling extra generous, why don't you like this video? Why don't you like this video?